We did pretty good. By the way, I knew this was an interesting topic. I knew that there was a lot of interest out in the community. I didn't know that it was as hot a topic as it is. And so today, next to Brian Sussman, this is the most RSVP'd for event that the BAC has ever sponsored. So I thank you. Kyle, we thank you. We'll get you up here in a minute. Finish your lunch there, my friend. We normally start about 12:45. We're gonna extend the length of the program because I know that you're gonna have a ton of questions after this. I met Kyle Oakey by calling him on the phone, introducing myself, and then going to the San Jose Police Department and meeting with him. By the way, I served as a San Jose police officer many years ago. And Kyle was kind enough to take me on a tour of the building. And it's the same building, but it ain't the same building. So it was a little bit like going back into time. I was absolutely flabbergasted as I left the police department and I had heard what sex trafficking was about. And so I'm going to introduce Kyle Oakey, who is a sergeant in the Sexual Assault Unit. He heads the Human Trafficking Task Force. Kyle's been with the San Jose Police Department for over 21 years. He started out where we all did, and that's in patrol. Was it midnights? It was midnights, yeah. Nothing like the old midnight shift. He worked as a field training officer. He worked in street crimes. He worked with the Metro unit, with Vice, and also in the Division of Gaming Control. Got promoted to sergeant in 2004. He's been working patrol, assault unit supervisor, Bureau of Investigations, and currently is the Human Trafficking Task Force supervisor. This guy knows his stuff. He's got a story to tell that is, well, it's shocking. And I think that in an hour as we leave, we will all be better for hearing Sergeant Kyle Oakey. Please, Kyle.
First, thank you for having me here. I am the Human Trafficking Task Force Supervisor at the San Jose Police Department. At the San Jose Police Department, we are one of the few departments that has a Human Trafficking Task Force. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? I don't want to break it. Okay, we're one of the few departments in our area that has a Human Trafficking Task Force. One of the reasons our department has a Human Trafficking Task Force is we're funded through the Bureau of Justice Administration, the federal government. We also have a CalEMA grant. We also have a third grant, which is through OJJDP, and that's for CSEC. It's the commercial sexual exploitation of children. So one of the things that we do with our human trafficking is we also focus on the children and the sex trafficking as it revolves around children. Does everybody know what human trafficking is? Kind of have a general idea? Well, at our department, we take the true victim-centered approach to human trafficking. We work closely with our NGOs. There are South Bay Coalition to End Human Trafficking. There are advocacy groups. There's about 40 individuals or organizations that are part of that coalition. We're also part of that coalition. We work closely with the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, ICE, Department of Labor, our District Attorney's Office, and the AUSA. So that's kind of how we partner up, that's how we work these cases, and that's how we work together. What is human trafficking? It's basically the greatest civil rights violation known to mankind. It's modern day slavery, period. That's all it is. It's people being taken either, if they're adults, against their will by some type of force or fraud or coercion, and forced into some type of labor or commercial sexual exploitation. One of the things we have in our area a lot of is domestic sex trafficking of minors. We have quite a few minors that are being trafficked into this trade of being kidnapped, being coerced, being tricked into human trafficking and into the sex industry. Back in 2000, the TVPA, the federal government came up with the TVPA, it's the Trafficking Victim Protection Act. It basically defined what human trafficking is. Human trafficking has existed forever, period. But it took till 2000 for the federal government to define what human trafficking is and make it a crime federally for the trafficking. In 2006, California came up with its laws on what human trafficking is. But basically the TVPA came up with this definition for the elements of human trafficking. Basically, it's obtaining a person, no matter how you word it, recruiting, harbor, transportation, right? It's obtaining a person by any type of force, fraud, coercion, for any type of forced labor or commercial sexual exploitation. The only difference in this is if it involves a child under the age of 18 that's being brought into the commercial sex industry. There is no need for force, fraud, or coercion. If a child under the age of 18 is involved in any type of prostitution-related crimes or sex industry, then they are victims of human trafficking if there's a perpetrator involved in that. The TVPA kind of went with the model of a victim-centered approach. Everything is to the needs of the victim and how we can help the victim out. As law enforcement, that's kind of a hard thing for us to figure out. I came on almost 22 years ago. I'm not that old, it hasn't been that long, but I can tell you police work from when I came on to here is completely different. There was no victim-centered approach. How did I help out a victim? It was simple. I went to the call and we were trained that if it was a domestic violence, how did I help you? I took the perpetrator to jail. I solved your problem. Was that a solution to your problem? Absolutely not. I solved your problem for that night, nothing else. I worked a unit called Street Crimes. It was part of our special operations, and I worked basically like this, plainclothes, unmarked car, drove around in a car looking for public nuisance in our downtown area, which revolved a lot around prostitution-related crimes. There was one night we stopped a 13-year-old girl who was trafficked in San Jose, LA, Las Vegas. She was arrested in with her pimp. And ultimately she came here and then to Oakland. We had contact with her. Victim-centered approach is we talked to her. We basically re-traumatized her by asking her what occurred to her, all the sexual assaults that occurred to her, and that was it. We left that night, we found out who the perpetrator was, and we took him to jail. Later on, the victim's mother gets a hold of me and says, I found the camera in my daughter's bag. We go through the camera, we find different photographs of child pornography and her being sexually assaulted in these photos. Again, the non-victim centered approach, we have to go through each one of those photos individually with this victim, re-victimizing them, re-traumatizing them. And ultimately, I think we ended up with 4 people tried, convicted for this heinous crime. What did the department do? I got a major award for that arrest. But did we help that victim? Did we do anything for that victim? Absolutely not. With the victim-centered approach in the human trafficking aspect, it's completely different. You know, I deal with kids all the time now, but the first thing we do is we get an advocate there. As soon as we have contact with a child, an advocate shows up. And the advocate is part of the interview. So when we try to talk to them, you know, it's the old adage, they're probably gonna lie to me the first time. I let them lie to me. In the past, when I was younger, people lied to me. What do officers do? We like to talk louder because if we think we talk louder, they're gonna tell us the truth. It doesn't really work. We try it with our kids too. My kids just basically listen to me yell at them, and it doesn't really help our cause. So now with the victim-centered approach, I let them lie to me. I know they're lying, I have the proof that they're lying, and we just kind of build on it, and we build that rapport, and we build the relationship. And then basically it's convincing them that they're victims of this crime. When it relates to children, one of the hardest things I have to do is when they go back home, I'll spend an hour with them. Every month I'll go make contact with a victim and just talk to them. to see if they want to open up to me. I'll spend that hour talking to them. What do I do for the next half hour? Who's the most important person for me to talk to in the next half hour? The parents, the mom and the dad, especially the dad, because what are all the dad's reactions? They're going to be mad. Who are they blaming? They're not blaming the perpetrator. They're blaming their daughter. And I have to sit there and say, okay, I've talked to your daughter for 3 months now. I need you not to yell at her, not to tell her that she is the cause of this problem, that it was her fault. It's not her fault. So we work on it like that. With our advocates, I meet monthly. My advocates meet weekly with them. So now in between the meetings that I have with them and the meetings the advocates meet with them, the advocates talk to them. Try to explain to them who I am, what I do. It's not that blank face. Before, this is all I do. If it's a human trafficking case, I'm the only one that gets called. Unfortunately, I'm the only one in our department that specializes in human trafficking. So I don't know if my wife appreciates it, but 24/7, I am on call. When I was on vacation, I spent 3 hours on the phone while I was in Vegas dealing with a human trafficking case that started in Oakland, came to San Jose, and ultimately we had to work with both agencies. But it's something that we have to do and that we work on. As more officers get educated on what human trafficking is, it's going to make a big difference. And I think there's going to be a lot more victims identified in what human trafficking is. Just a little side note, I like to get off these slides. I have it here just kind of as a reference point, but as you can tell, I'm not going to follow them very often. If you have a question, ask a question. But one of the things with human trafficking, as you saw, it's a new law. Came into effect in 2000 for federal. Came into effect statewide in 2006. I went to the academy 22 years ago. Did I hear anything about human trafficking? No. I go to training every year through posts that we're required to have mandated training. In those 22 years, have I ever been given training on human trafficking? No. I'm the Human Trafficking Task Force Coordinator. Our department has a human trafficking unit. I've gone to our training unit and said, we need to have human trafficking training at our department. Everybody thinks it's a great idea. The chief is completely behind it. Everybody's behind it. But due to the fact of staffing and resources, we weren't able to do it. We required so many hours of mandatory training that it wasn't there. And every agency around us is like that. With the passing of Proposition 35, our department doesn't take a stand whether we're for or against it. But one of the provisions in there was training, mandatory 2 hours of training on human trafficking. A lot of people came up against that, saying 2 hours wasn't enough. I look at it another way, 2 hours is better than nothing. And if I get officers on the streets that have an understanding of what human trafficking is, and they took a 2-hour training course, they're gonna say, wow, that domestic violence, that disturbance call could be something more. A lot of people don't know what the term human trafficking is, or they hear it and go, that's just international, foreign nationals brought into the States and forced into labor, or working in the massage parlor. Everybody thinks, most people think the typical human trafficking is the Asian massage parlors and the Asian prostitution rings involving in it, but that's just a very small part of it. We have so many different realms of what human trafficking is in our area. One of the things that's difficult though is, what does everybody see in the news? What is human trafficking to almost everybody when you see it? When you see this definition, and you saw the two elements are at the end, when it said forced labor, commercial sexual exploitation, what does everybody hear about? Commercial sexual exploitation. That's all the news wants to talk about, that's all people want to talk about. Why? Because that's what's seen. That's what's out in the open. That's the easiest crime for us to locate as law enforcement. I can tell you, labor is very difficult to find. I can't go into a restaurant, I can't go into a warehouse, I can't go to a store, I can't go into a house and point out a human trafficking victim. It's just not gonna happen. But I can go drive down the street, I can go to the tracks in San Jose. We have, if you're not familiar with San Jose, we have 3 major tracks in San Jose where commercial sexual exploitation occurs. I can drive down that track and I can locate a girl, boys, anybody, 24/7. 8 o'clock in the morning, they start working on the streets. They usually stop 2, 3 o'clock out in the streets, and they're out there working. There was one day I drove out with one of my partners, and we counted 12 girls working in a 1-mile radius on Monterey Highway. How many of those are human trafficking victims? Very, very few from what they'll admit to, but how many of them are probably human trafficking? Probably a lot. But that's that building that relationship and the rapport with them to make a determination, do you have human trafficking? One of the things with human trafficking that we have a lot of is the internet usage. The internet is everywhere, everybody has access to it. Again, I used to work street crimes in the late 90s. Computers were there, but they weren't used as rapidly as they are now. Prostitution was a crime that occurred, but people had to be out in the public eye. People had to drive around the streets and find a girl that's working on the streets or a young boy working on the streets. And they would do what we call curse lap, just drive around them, circle them, circle them, circle them, trying to find someone that they want to pick up. With the internet, they don't need to do that anymore. Everybody's out there. I can hide in my car, I can hide in my house, I can be on my iPhone, my iPad, whatever device you want to be on, and you can find a victim of human trafficking in the commercial sex industry and go make contact with them. People like minors. It's a fetish for a lot of people that they'll focus on the ads that document young children that are involved in this. And they focus on that. There's plenty of videos out, if you ever go on YouTube. I think Dateline did a story in Las Vegas where you watch the guy negotiate and the guy's like, okay, how much for a minor? I'm willing to pay another $400 as long as you bring me a minor. The younger, the better. That is what we have here. Is human trafficking in the commercial sex industry bad in San Jose? In a week, just the last week alone, I had 7 minors from the ages of 13 to 17 identified and contacted and admitted that they're in the commercial sex industry and that they have pimps that are brought them out here to work. They work everywhere. A lot of local girls that we have here, they travel all over. If you live in San Jose, you're usually not going to work in San Jose too much because you take the risk of being identified, being seen by someone that knows you. So you're going to go out to other counties. Well, the same thing occurs here. Other girls come or other boys come from other counties into our county to work. With the internet, people ask me, should all websites be taken down that involve the commercial sexual exploitation? That's a very difficult question to answer. The internet is a terrible thing when it comes to exploitation of these young girls and boys, but I can tell you as law enforcement, I use the internet all the time. I am on there tracking these young girls and these boys on a daily basis. The farthest 14-year-old girl I followed, she went from San Jose to LA. By the time we caught up to her, she was in Maryland to Virginia to Washington, D.C., back to Maryland, before we were to have an officer in Maryland pick her up. Could I do that without the internet? No. Got a 15-year-old girl that went to Georgia. Again, internet allows me to follow them, locate them, and have officers respond out to pick them up and rescue them out of that situation and brought back to our area so we can help them and we can talk to them. I've been in this assignment just over 20 months. We've gotten 59 minors that are involved in this. That's just the ones I've contacted. We look at it, and I'm kind of expanding what I see as human trafficking. Everybody sees human trafficking on the minor aspect of it in our area as the girls that are on the internet or sitting out on the street corner. How many people have been to a Vietnamese cafe in the city of San Jose? Anybody know what a Vietnamese cafe in San Jose is? Okay. Coffee bar, right? Well, what do these young girls dress like? Pretty much. And they get paid for based on what they wear. I've talked to owners. If you wear a bikini, you make $10 an hour. If you wear lingerie that's see-through, that's $11 an hour. If you wear a thong and pasties, $12. If you go topless, it's $13 an hour. Why do they do this and why do the owners do this? Easy. They're telling us this. The only way we get customers is if we have them dress like this. If they don't dress like this, they're going to go to somewhere else. Is that commercial sexual exploitation? It is in my book. And that's something that we've expanded and we started looking at. Also at some of these cafes, you'll see some of the bikini bars will have lap dancing. Young girls providing lap dances for $7 that allow men to grab them anywhere they want to grab them. Is that human trafficking? No one's looked at it like that in a long time, ever. That's something that we've just started looking at because these are things that are out there. You know, we have in San Jose a lot of underground strip clubs. You know, the last one was a Carcero store. Basically, the only reason we find those is when people come forward. We lucked out for the fact of us being able to locate it and get some kids out of there and out of that situation. But it was only for the fact that this young boy goes to this underground strip club that he heard about. He paid his $100 cover charge, and then he paid $20 for a lap dance. Do you think he would call the police and let us know about this illegal activity that's occurring in this establishment? Absolutely not. Why did he call the police? Simple. He's sitting there getting a lap dance, having what he thought was the time of his life, until he looked at the face of the girl and realized it's his best friend's sister. So he turns around, calls up his buddy. Do you know where your 15-year-old sister is? She's ran away. She's been missing for 3 weeks. Well, here she is. So, you know, we go out, we provide different types of training, and I go talk to a lot of people. One of the things I always say is, you know, again, no one in this building is probably going to these establishments, but you have friends, you have people that talk, kids that are going out, your kids' friends, they're going to, you know, would you look at these establishments differently if you know most of them are minors that are working in there, or a lot of them are minors that are working in there? I've talked to different organizations and different victims that have been rescued from this type of situation. A lot of them start out in different strip clubs, and a lot of them start out underage. And then they either lie about their age, or the businesses just don't care. Some of our Vietnamese cafes, I found 4 16-year-old girls working in there, 2 each day. And the owner didn't care how old they were. All she cared about was they were bringing in money. Why does human trafficking exist? It's all about money. You know, human trafficking, if you guys all look at the stats, it's $32 billion is what it grosses annually. With that, you keep that in mind. What's above human trafficking right now? Illegal drugs, okay? Is human trafficking gonna pass that? It's gonna pass it quickly, it's gonna pass it easily. Why? Drugs, I can make it, I can sell it, and I can use it one time. A person, I can sell, use, abuse over and over and over again. And they're a commodity that, in the sex industry, you can sell them to 10 different guys any given night. You know, I've talked to some of these young girls and boys that are getting paid thousands of dollars a week, thousands of dollars from Johns. And the perpetrator is getting all the money. The kids get absolutely nothing. What's a treat for a kid? McDonald's. You know, that's what they're getting sold. They're basically sold a dream. Everybody wonders why victims of human trafficking don't come forward and talk to the police, especially as it revolves around the sex industry. One, because what do most people think human trafficking is? Behind closed bars, in a house, locked up, chained up, not being let out. That's what most people think human trafficking is. Human trafficking a lot is mind games and how they control the victims through just coercion. Most of our pimps in San Jose, a lot of them are just what we call Romeo pimps. They talk to these kids, they sell them a dream, and they just trick them into working. They trick them into giving them everything they make, and they basically take advantage of these young kids because they're not old enough to understand what's truly occurring. Human trafficking in our area wasn't prosecuted that much at all. Santa Clara County, their very first human trafficking conviction was in 2009. Law went in effect 2006. I talked to the DA that used to prosecute human trafficking crimes. One of her, and I'm going to use the word excuses because I think it's an excuse of why you don't prosecute human trafficking, is one, human trafficking is an intersect crime, so there's always other crimes associated to it. You will never get human trafficking in and by itself. Commercial sex industry, you have human trafficking, you have pimping and pandering, you have assault with deadly weapon, you have domestic violence, there's always other crimes to charge, false imprisonment. But they would say, well, we don't want to touch human trafficking because most people don't understand what human trafficking is. They think it's all just people brought in from a foreign country here illegally, period. So they never really pursued human trafficking. The very first case our DAs ever took is basically when two girls, two 16-year-old girls, go on the internet, they decide, hey, I think it would be fun to go party with gangsters, was what they told the police. And that was their goal, is to party with gangsters. So they went on the internet, because you can always find a gangster on the internet, and they hooked up with them and they went to party with them. Well, one of the worst things happened to these girls. They actually found gangsters and validated gangs. So what happened? They partied with them. They got a room, they got alcohol, they got drugs. What happened after that night? Well, they own them now. You have to pay me back for the room, the alcohol, and the drugs. Okay? They put them out on the street and they worked them, and they worked them, and they beat them, and they threatened them. One of the girls was very boisterous and did not want to do this. What happened to her? She got beat on a daily basis. The other sister was scared, didn't really resist, because all she's seeing is her sister getting beat up. The perpetrator got tired of these girls. They got completely tired of the complaining. He got tired of having the beaters, so he basically went out and sold her to another pimp. How much are two girls worth in our market today? Take a guess. Anybody?
$2,000.
You figure on an escort that's working on the streets or working on the internet for an hour, they make anywhere from an average of 120 to 180 a day is what they charge and what people are willing to pay. You do about 10 of those a night, maybe 5, because there's 2 of them, you go 5 each. That's a lot of money on a daily basis. Are they worth a lot of money? Are they worth a big commodity? He sold them for $300 for both of them. The other pimp ended up working them, making money off of them. What happened with the one girl that liked to complain? She continued to complain. She continued to get beat. How did they get away? Well, her sister heard the pimp talking to another guy saying, I'm killing them. Tonight, they're dead. I'm tired of listening to her. She's tired of complaining. I'm just going to kill her. Well, they have nothing to lose now. Now they run. What's worse than being killed? There is nothing worse. So they found an opportunity and they ran. The DA finally decided, I'm going to pursue human trafficking charges along with other charges, because I can now explain to a jury that Pimp A sold 2 girls to Pimp B for $300, because that's how she thought the community at large would understand what human trafficking is. I look at it differently. We got to give the community members more credit. If I come out and give you a brief definition of what human trafficking is, just that one brief definition I gave you, if I told you that he had 2 minors that he was working and that he was forcing in, he was beating, how many people would need a better explanation than that and would say you're guilty of human trafficking along with a variety of other crimes? They looked at it as, we're not going to pursue that, we're not going to pursue that, we're not going to pursue that. That was the very first one. In the last 20 months, we've had a change of a DA that's actually prosecuting it since I took over, and we sit down and we talk to them, and we train them. We have 15 filings now, a variety of different cases of human trafficking, both as it revolves around children and adults. You know, the very first case we took her, I thought it was pretty simple. This one young lady, 22, it was in the paper, she came down to Texas because she met some guy online. So she wanted to come party with him and just hook up with him. The person she met online was not the perpetrator. He was not a pimp. He was just some guy that he met online, and he figured he's gonna have fun and try to get her to come down. She comes down, he ends up flaking out, probably because he was just playing a game on the internet. So she's sitting at a bus bench. A pimp ends up picking her up at the bus bench. They go back to a hotel room. They sleep, they drink, they do some drugs. The next morning she wakes up, all her belongings are gone, her phone is gone, her clothes are gone. He basically posted her on an adult entertainment website and says, you know, I own you now. You need to go out there and make my money because you owe me for the room, the clothes, the phone, the drugs, the alcohol, everything we used. She says, I don't play that game. She tries to walk out the door. He grabs her, throws her on the bed, gets on top of her, chokes her out and says, white bitch, I own you now. They end up pimping her out a few times. We ended up getting the case later on. We identify him and he gets put in custody. The DA looked at it and goes, I wonder if a jury would understand that that's human trafficking. The jury would understand that's false imprisonment because he wouldn't let her leave, but would they understand that's human trafficking? Again, simple definition, at least in my opinion, very simple definition. She's being forced into something. So everybody always talks about why don't we have better stats on human trafficking? Why don't we have better stats? Human trafficking's always existed. We've always made arrests. We've always had contacts with human trafficking, but they haven't always been tried as human trafficking. So don't get stuck on the numbers of how many arrests or how many convictions of human trafficking there are. You won't truly know what a human trafficking case is until you read everything and truly understand what type of incidences we have here. One of the cases that we work on here, that we worked with San Francisco, is a labor case. How many people buy fruit from the corner fruit vendor that's selling fruit on the side of the street? Yeah, it occurred in San Francisco. Young boy selling fruit on the corner. I think he was a captain at the time, or a deputy chief, stops by, talks to the kid. The kid pretty much doesn't say too much to the captain, and he drives on his merry way. Next day he goes out and he sees this kid again, makes contact with this young kid selling fruit. And again, most officers drive by him. Most citizens drive by him or buy fruit from him. You know, captain goes up to talk to him. One of the main perpetrators, who was out of Mexico, comes up and tells the captain some choice words and basically tells him there's nothing he can do about it. Well, the captain, not knowing a single thing about human trafficking, walked away from that. Went back to his department, went to his sergeant, who I know, and said, nobody talks to me like that. You figure out what's going on. You work this case, because this ain't happening in my city, and nobody treats me like that, period. The captain didn't have anything at the time, so the officer and the sergeant, they start working the case, and they find out they have a human trafficking. This boy, was he a human trafficking victim?
Yes.
No. Absolutely not. He was 15 years old, I believe, if I'm correct, maybe wrong on the age, but he was a minor. But he was there on his own. There was no forced fraud or coercion for him to be out there selling fruit. He had more money in his pocket that he got to keep and that he would send back to his family on a regular basis than I have. I don't know how many of you guys carry $5,000 in your pocket on a daily basis, but I don't. And I'm lucky if I have $5 half the time. But he has $5,000. And he would go out there and he would sell fruit. They lived in San Jose. They went to Salinas every morning with a group of people. They went to Salinas. They brought their fruit. They went over to San Francisco to sell it. If they didn't sell all their fruit, they came back to San Jose and they had to go door to door and sell that fruit until they were done. And they weren't allowed back in that house, except for the boy. The boy kind of had it easy. When we rescued that boy, and that boy was, in our custody, what was his first request? I want to go back to the house because my Xbox is there that I bought, my TV. I want my property back. And, that was easy. We drove him out there and he picked up his property. Who are the human trafficking victims? The adults there on that case that were being forced into this. There were multiple adults that were basically initially smuggled across the border, and then once you're smuggled, usually smuggling is a violation of the border. So you're smuggled across, you pay your fee, and you're off on your merry way. Smuggling oftentimes turns into human trafficking. You're smuggled across the border, you have a fee, but then they say, well, now you owe me this much. Now you owe me more money. Now you have to work for me to pay that money off, and you're not free to go. And they hold them captive. So they had victims that were being held like that and being forced to work. Yes?
How can they give up
as a minor, can he, even though he liked doing that, because he was making money, does he have the right to say that someday?
He doesn't have, there's other crimes associated, don't get me wrong, there's other crimes associated, but the definition of human trafficking, he did not fit the definition of human trafficking when it was prosecuted. But there are other crimes associated to that. And ultimately, he was reunited with his family, who sold him in the first place. His family is the one that sold him into the situation. But they were, you know, they were getting a check from him or money from him on a weekly basis. So everything was kind of, you know, for the family, they were like, whatever. You know, I sit here and, you know, labor cases are hard to find. Most of my labor cases are domestic servitude cases. And most of those revolve around foreign nationals that are sold by their parents into some type of servitude marriage. And I find most of these cases out because they go to our NGOs. We work closely with the Catherine George Alexander Community Law Center, which is part of Santa Clara University. They do a lot of immigration issues. They're fully trained in human trafficking. So when a victim comes in to talk about immigration issues, they always screen them for human trafficking situations. So that's how we get most of our labor cases. So most of our domestic servitude cases come that way. So now we talk to them, we find out, yeah, you know, I had my parents, they sold me to this family, I had to marry this son, I had to come here, I had to tend to his needs, his brother's needs, his extended family needs, everybody's needs. If I didn't, I got beat. I had to clean, do all the chores, and do everything for these families, and they have no choice, you know. One of the prime examples that we use, and I use it in my presentation, is Wisconsin, the hub of all human trafficking, right? In Wisconsin, yeah, it's not really the hub, but one of the biggest cases that they had was 2 doctors, Philippine doctors that make a lot of money. They make more money than me, make more money than a whole lot of people in here when you have 2 doctors, one is a surgeon. They go to the Philippines and hire a 14-year-old girl, get her from her parents, bring her to the States with the promise of, you'll have a better life here, you'll be educated, and everything will be good. They basically lock her up into their house, and she had to tend to the house needs and their child. They had a son. She basically raised that son. When the son was old enough to get marriage, what's the best wedding present he could have? He got himself a slave. They gave their slave to the son. What happened when son's marriage didn't quite go as he planned? Wife divorced him. Who's the first phone call she makes? Well, anonymous person makes. It's the FBI. So she was in slavery for just shy of 20 years, I believe. And they got, I think, probably gonna be off on my numbers, but I think they got 8 years. The wife got more time than the husband because the wife did most of the physical violence toward this girl. But she's in captivity for many years. They got half of the time she did. Amazing, amazing. You hold someone captive, in my opinion, that guy should go to jail for 5 years for every year that she was in captivity, period. Not the other way around, which the way the laws seem to be and the way they were written and how they worked. Yeah. Yep.
Sorry to do this, but I have to do this. What I see is one of the largest problems when you solve a case enough to say, hey, Mr. Diaz, and they give you a BS reason. General public never knows what happened.
Yes.
They don't, but if you actually said it, their name, we would find out where their wives are, where their kids are, and say, how can this quote upstanding citizen, Mr. Assistant DA, do these type of things? And that's where they get away with it. And the same goes for judge. It's not giving, because everything's secretive. And so we have no idea what happened. All we see is an absolute mess out there.
Yes.
And, you know, you'll just have the same problem with their anti-gang unit. 8 guys. And they aren't all full-time. And now it's smaller. How can they accomplish it? And the same goes for, you know, a whole bunch of other issues. But if you knew who was saying no And you'd see a lot of help from other people, because then we would know. When we go to vote for a judge, we have no idea.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you just in my experience in the last 20 months that I've been here, the DA that they weren't getting filings on, she's on a different assignment, and the DA we currently have assigned out to this unit is very aggressive. She will charge every crime possible, plus human trafficking. So it's not one or the other with her. Judges have been extremely good. I write a lot of search warrants, and I take those in front of a judge. You'd be amazed how many judges sit there and go, human trafficking. First, I gotta tell them what human trafficking is, explain to them what human trafficking is, explain to them how human trafficking is occurring in our area, and how a lot of our victims of human trafficking, at least in our area, are domestic victims. So after I kind of give them a brief overview of it, to get a search warrant signed is real easy. To get a arrest warrant signed is even easier. But you have to take that time, you have to sit down and talk to them, because you're right, a lot of them aren't educated about it. They look for, they look for an easy way out, because again, I have to sit there and I have to talk to a judge for 20 minutes and explain to him what human trafficking is before he'll read the search warrant, sign the search warrant. Think about a DA having to go in front of a jury, explain to him what human trafficking is, and the time it takes to that, and now you have to try to explain how the elements of the situation that occurred meets the elements of the crime, and have that jury hopefully come back with a conviction and a guilty plea on that. They look at it as, this is the simpler, the one with the Texas girl that was held on the bed, hand to the throat, and said, I own you. The simplest charge was false imprisonment. False imprisonment, according to the DA, was 10 years that they could get for him. You know what human trafficking was at that time? 3. So what would you go after? I couldn't even really argue with her. There was nothing for me to argue about. If I'm gonna get a perpetrator off the streets for an additional, possibly 7 years, it wouldn't be because of time served, but possible additional length of time, I'm gonna go with that. I'm not gonna argue with her. As long as I can get that perpetrator off the streets where he can't reoffend other people. Because that's the ultimate goal, that's my ultimate goal. We take a victim-centered approach, and we always take the victim-centered approach. I wanna get the victim services as quickly as possible. But ultimately, I'm still a cop. I still wanna get someone in jail, because that's my ultimate goal, because if he's sitting in jail, he's not reoffending.
Where do you get the advocates? You say you have some advocates to meet with these people. Where do the advocates come from?
A lot of our advocates come from YWC, our Community Solutions. They're part of our coalition. We also have, our coalition has an MOU with Juvenile Hall.
What's an MOU?
It's a memorandum of agreement with Juvenile Hall. So if a child is brought into Juvenile Hall and they're brought in for a prostitution-related crime, or they're brought in for another crime, and through interviewing and them talking to them, they determine that they're potentially CSET victims, which is the commercial sexual exploitation of a child, then an advocate has to be brought to Juvenile Hall within 1 hour. They have a 1 hour response time when they're called. So they always have contact, and they're always supplied some type of services. Can the juvenile deny it? Yes, they can. They can say, I don't want it. But at least we're providing it, at least we're getting them out there. Perpetrators like to control people. It's all about control. We try to break that. I'm part of this working group that I'm actually missing because the meeting started at 12:15. That we've been meeting for a little over a year and a half on what to do with CSET cases. And how to deal with the minors that we come in contact with and the victims. Yes? Oh, okay. And a lot of that has to do with what's the best thing to do with them. Some people say take them home if they have a safe environment. Some people say they should all go to juvenile hall. Some people say take them to a group home. In our area, we have, in Santa Clara, we have the Bill Wilson Center, or Kathy's Place. They talk about using that facility. And we sit there and try to make a determination while sitting behind closed doors on a desk of what's the best thing to do with them. Everybody wants to come up with a definite answer. Definitely take them to juvenile hall. Definitely take them to a group home. Definitely do this. I come from law enforcement, everything to us is discretion. I'm the one sitting there, and I'm the one investigating this case and talking to everybody and know what's going on. Who's the best person to make a decision of what's going to be the safest environment for this child at the time? Not all children should be taken to juvenile hall. Not all children should be released to their parents. Not all children should be taken to the Bill Wilson Center or the shelter or back to their group home. Most counties around us, they detain. They hold the kids in juvenile hall. You go down to San Diego, they hold them in juvenile hall, period. Usually for an entire process. And, you know, it's kind of, they find the effectiveness in the prosecution end of it, but is that, you know, the true victim-centered approach? Depends on how you look at it. Because a victim-centered approach to some people, and it's just some people, is I'm taking her out of this dangerous situation. She's a minor being sexually assaulted on a daily basis. She's not working as a prostitute. She's being sexually assaulted and raped on a daily basis. I'm breaking that tie. I'm getting her away from her pimp, and I'm making it so she can't be sexually assaulted day in, day out by taking her to juvenile hall. That's one thought. But then the second thought is, that's not very victim-centered because she's being detained. Let's take her to a group home. And at the group home, what's gonna happen? You know, I've dropped kids off and they have followed me out the door. And once I drop them off, I can't stop them. They walk out. Who follows them? I've talked to group homes. Yeah, you drop them off, 5 minutes later, car pulls up, her pimp, she gets in the car and they drive away. Is that effective? No. Does that always happen? Absolutely not. And that's why we have to be able to make a discretion call of what we do with these kids. You know, I just pulled my stats. The 59 kids that we've dealt with, I think 20 went to juvenile hall, 20 went back to either a parent or a group home. Some went to Bill Wilson, some went to the children's shelter, and I think one went back to Oakland PD. So, you know, we use discretion all the time, but we have experts together that can't figure out what to do in this type of situation and what to do, what's the best situation for these children. I went to Utah, we got together 120 what they claimed are subject matter experts in CSEC. And we sat there with law enforcement, prosecutors, federal, state, local, advocates, victims. Probably the best thing in that training was having the victims there, telling us, yeah, you guys may think that works, but let me tell you, that's a terrible idea. That doesn't work. This is how you could approach it, and this is what you could say. That was probably the best thing I got out of that. But when you have these experts put together, and we sit there, year and a half, you think we come up with a way of what to deal with these kids. You know, I sit there and say, this is easy. Leave us the discretion that we need to make our decision, and, you know, trust us to make the appropriate decision, you know.
Most of everything I've heard, people are brought in from other countries. Now you're making it sound like they're really not true, that most of them are within the country.
Most of our cases that we have in our area, and my grant requires me to cover Santa Clara County, San Benito County, Monterey County, and Santa Cruz County. So those are my 4 counties that I cover. Most of our victims in the commercial sex industry are domestic victims. They're all local, bred here.
How can, most of us are parents or grandparents, how can we protect our children and our grandchildren? What are the things that we look for, that we should be looking for, and what are the tactics that are employed by the pimps that want to turn these children out?
How many of you guys have social networking sites? How many of your kids have social networking sites? Social networking is a terrible, terrible thing. You know, I always joke about this, but I'm sure my kids know. I got the 3 most unlucky children in the world. I have 3 girls. Social networking to them is very far and few between. Do I block them from all of it? Heck no. If I did, we'd be fighting all the time, and it's not worth it. But as a parent, you need to know, as a grandparent, you need to know what the kids are doing and what your kids are involved in and who they're communicating on these sites. How many people have heard of Instagram, Mocospace, Snapchat? There's so many sites that come out that these kids are on. I just went to a training that the FBI put on, and one of the kids brought up a site, and I was like, what the heck is that site? You know, we learn about sites every day, but as a parent, you need to know what your kids are doing and be cognizant of who they're talking to. I have a pretty good relationship with my kids, and I don't know how many people can get away with this or how many parents can get away with this, but if they want a social networking site, I have it. Whatever site they have, I get. I have their username and I have their password, and I get to see what they do. Everybody thinks I'm probably the terrible guy that goes through these kids' sites on a daily basis. Not the case. My wife is. It works out well because she'll sit there and go, okay, you have a friends list. How do you know this person? I don't really know them, but I want a lot of followers, or I want a lot of friends. You guys talk to your kids, what's their goal in life? Have a lot of followers, have a lot of friends. Who cares how many followers or how many friends you have on your list? Because if you don't know them, you don't know them. But go through that list and ask them, who's this person? You don't know them? Delete it, blocked, keep them out, keep them away from them. I did a training class at a high school. And one of the things, I'm part of the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force that I work with at our department. And you know, one of the tricks that was being used on Facebook was a perpetrator posing as Justin Bieber. So I sit there and I'm talking to some high school kids, and I tell them this ploy and this trick. Most of them go, yeah, I wouldn't believe that. I wouldn't do that. Yeah, you gotta be dumb to believe it, and the friend them. Out of that class, how many people friended him? 2. Would have friended him, didn't, but would have friended him. 2 girls. So is that now a stupid idea? You know, if their parents knew what they were doing and being involved in their life, you think a parent would talk to them and say, do you really think Justin Bieber's gonna accept your friendship or send you a friend request? Come on. Don't be clueless. I did a little test one day. I created a Facebook profile using a picture of a Lamborghini. And it was very plain. I didn't put anything else on it. I think I claimed I was 20-something and lives somewhere in Texas or something. I found 25 local girls in our area and 25 local guys, and I friended them. How many females said yes?
All of them.
Close, 24. But then I got some friend requests from other females. How many guys said yes?
All of them.
1. Guys don't like other guys on Facebook and social networking, and they don't, they don't trust. But a lot of people will trust people on these social networking sites. I have contact with victims all the time. How did you meet the perpetrator? He friended me. Did you know him? Absolutely not. But he friended me, and I wanted to be friends. I like the friends list, and we started communicating with him. And then you start thinking about some of the sites that you wouldn't normally think about. How many of your kids have Xbox, Nintendos, PlayStation 3s that they can play online and play with other people and communicate with other people online? How many people monitor that as parents? I can tell you, luckily my kids aren't on it, but one of my buddies at work, his kids play it all the time, and he can't stand listening to his kids talking to people as they play these games. But what happens on these games? They sit there and that's their recruiting. They learn so much about these kids, their parents. Then what's the trick? What's the easiest trick? You ask them a question that they wouldn't tell their parents. Once you have that answer, that's pretty meaningless. They think, the kids think, I'm just talking, they get real comfortable, they're playing a game, they answer a question, maybe about sex, and they give an answer. Now, what's mom gonna say? Well, this is your mom's name, this is where she works, and this is her phone number, because I can find anything on the internet. And if you don't send me this photo, now I'm going to tell your mom, I'm calling your mom. Once they have the photo, now they're starting to get them out on the streets and they start whipping them in other ways. They start controlling them. You think that the games are harmless, you don't want to listen to them, because I can guarantee you I probably wouldn't want to listen to my kids playing other kids' games, but it's something as a parent you need to be aware of. One of the worst sites, I think, or one of many bad sites, is Snapchat. Anybody know what Snapchat is?
No.
It's an app that Apple has that you can take a picture. After you take that picture, you can time it 1 to 10 seconds, and you can send it to people. After that 10 seconds, that picture disappears, and you cannot find that picture, and you cannot pull that picture back up. I can tell you, you cannot pull that picture back up. If I do a search warrant on the company, I will get a message that said a message was sent from A to B, but I couldn't see the photo. So what do kids think? That's the greatest app possible to kids, because what do kids like to do? They like to sext. With sexting, I can send that photo and it's gonna disappear. What do kids don't realize? What can you do with that picture? Screenshot it, you know? Yeah, that's funny, because we sat around one day and we have all these subject matter experts, and we come up with all these neat ways how we can save it, screenshotting, and there's some other ways you can actually save it. And one old timer looked at us and go, "What are you guys doing? Just pull out a camera and take a picture of it." So that picture will always exist. So kids think it's harmless, kids think it's gonna disappear, and they're gonna do something they normally wouldn't do. So the parent, as a grandparent talking to your kids, talk to their children, you gotta be aware that they can't be naive. They're kids, you gotta understand, they are naive. They're gonna trust people, they're gonna trust these things that are gonna disappear, and they're gonna trust that they can get away with it. What's the guy gonna say? Just send me a picture, what harm is it? It's gonna disappear. Time it for 2 seconds, it's gonna disappear after 2 seconds. They're gonna convince them to put that picture up there. They're gonna trick them to do that. As a parent, you need to be aware of that. And you need to be aware of what they do. One parent asked me one time, you know, how do you monitor everything? You're not. What do you battle? You can't battle everything with your kids, but you gotta give them some leadway. Social networking sites. Most kids don't use Facebook anymore. Facebook is for older people. Facebook is for college kids and older people. Instagram, Vine, Snapchat, there's so many different sites that the kids use now that I can't even remember, Kicks. But you know, that's what the kids are using. So when you start trying to control your kids, hey, you're not gonna get Facebook until you do this, this or that. Or, you know, I'm gonna monitor your Facebook. Your kids don't care. They're not on Facebook. But you think as a parent, because that's what you use and that's what all you hear about, all most people hear about is Facebook, Facebook, Facebook. You know, you think, okay, I'm cool, I understand social networking, Facebook's everything, and you try to control Facebook. You gotta realize what other sites are out there and what other people are doing, and be aware of what your kids are on. That's the biggest thing, is talking to your kids and being open to them.
How do you know what sites are out there?
Yeah. How do you find out?
How do I find out?
How do we
How
find
do we
out?
find out as a parent?
Research. Truthfully, talk to your kids, research, look it on the internet. I find most of my sites through my kids because, you know, again, I guess I'm a little controlling, maybe a lot. If my kids want an application, they have to ask me. And I have to look at the application and I get to read what it's about. They don't have the Apple iTunes password. I have it, you know. I'm the one that knows what they're going on, so I get to read these things. So I know what they're going on. Do they get every site they want? Absolutely not. Do they get most of them? Depending on if they're harmless or what I think are harmless, or what I can monitor. Because every app they have is on my phone, which drives me up the wall because half the things they look at, I don't want to look at. But as a parent, you should, and you should know what your kids are doing. I have it a little easier because I talk to kids all the time, you know, that even aren't mine, because this is who I deal with a lot, and I hear what they're being recruited on. So, you know, for me to find out, it's easy. But again, a lot of times it's my kids going, hey, can I have this app? Hey, can I have that? That's how you find out. So talk to your kids. Know what they're doing, know what they want to get on, and kind of be aware of what's going on around them, and talk to them. Let them know. You know, my kids, again, probably are a little different than most kids, but we'll drive down the street and she'll go, there's a pro. That's a prostitute or someone working in the prostitution field to her. So I don't sugarcoat or hide anything from them, and as a parent, I don't think you should. They have to know what's going on around them.
So they can't get on these things by themselves, in other words, they can't buy one of these things for themselves?
They can if they control their own site. If they have their own iTunes account. Like for iPhone, I'm gonna just use an iPhone, because I own an iPhone and all my kids have either an iPod or iPhone. You have to have an iTunes account. And with that iTunes account, to buy an app, you have to have the password. And I can set up their phone that if they want to do anything on it, they have to put in the password. So, again, I'm extreme. I'm a little controlling. I know that, but I know what goes around and what I deal with. So again, my kids are probably the most unlucky kids. I'm not gonna. Okay, Howard.
Our department have the assets that are equal to the challenge. And the reason why I ask is because I'm aware of the city's fiscal policies against the department that have led to a lot of cutbacks. So do you have the assets that are equal to the challenge you're in the area?
I don't think anybody does, truthfully. Nobody really has the assets necessary. Right now, assigned out to the Human Trafficking Task Force, it should be at least 3 officers plus a supervisor. I guess your 3 officers plus a supervisor is me, myself, and I. And I do everything. I come out, I give all the trainings, I do all the investigations. I work, luckily.
So it's a one-guy operation with sex trafficking in the San Jose.
Yeah, and luckily,
San Jose.
here's the lucky part to this. I work closely with the FBI, and most local cops you talk to, they don't like the FBI, right? Nobody thinks the FBI does much, but I am lucky to have 2 of probably the hardest FBI officers that I've found and worked with. They come, I have one agent that pretty much walks in our door, passes our security, and get in herself now. That we do interviews probably on a daily basis together. So, you know, San Jose, yeah, it's me. But when I get a tip or I have investigations, I have a deputy chief that is very good. I can use any officer in our investigative bureau, and they're mine. I don't have to ask permission from anybody. You know, if a lieutenant has a problem, that's simple. Go talk to the deputy chief, because I now have permission to use anybody. With the federal grant, it's a little bit easier for the fact that when I'm saving people and having officers stay at the end of a shift, you know, that's funded through a federal grant. It's not the city's money. You know, it's something that we apply for and that the federal government is paying for. You know, I have right now 3 grants, 2 from feds, 1 from the state. So it makes my job a little bit easier. Ask me that in October, when my grant expires on September 30th, and if we don't get the new grant, I may have a different answer for you. But right now, it's great. I can get an officer from anywhere I want, and they will help out. So would I want more people assigned to my unit? Absolutely. Absolutely. But do I have the resources, and will the city give me the resources I need? Absolutely. The city thinks this is a very important topic. One of the things with grants, if you ever dealt with a police department or a government agency, is usually a grant is a special circumstance. They work the unit, and then when that grant expires, that unit no longer exists. Our chief has already said that if we do not get the new grant, there will be a human trafficking task force in the city of San Jose, and we will have at least a sergeant assigned out to it. So.
Let's give Sergeant Oki a hand. You know, I don't know how somebody keeps their mind clear and not become horribly jaded by dealing with the things that Kyle deals with.